If you have not already done so, go ahead and open up or print your Lesson 5-4 notes, which are going to be on petty cash. You're also going to want to open your Chapter 5 Quizlet. We have 2 terms we are going to be adding to that Quizlet today. To start with, our first term that we need to define is petty cash itself. So when we talk about petty cash or a petty cash fund or the petty cash account, that is an account that we use for small cash amounts or payments. So we're using our checking account for big cash amount payments, and we're going to use our petty cash account for small amounts or small payments. A lot of the times you'll see a petty cash account done in a petty cash box or a cash box like the one that is pictured here. Most common example of this I like to give students is the concession stand, where we have small amounts of cash and we are selling things or making payments with that small amount of cash from the cash box, just like in the concession stand. Now, the petty cash account is completely separate from cash. They are not the same. So they act the same, but you are going to have a separate cash account and a separate petty cash account. Like I said, they act the same because petty cash is going to be an asset account. So when we look at the T account for petty cash, we'll start by throwing in the title, and then we want debits on the left, credits on the right. So our normal balance of an asset account is going to be the debit side, and that normal balance, remember it always increases. So the credit balance of a petty cash would decrease.
An asset increasing is a debit. An asset decreasing is a credit.
And what we have to do first before we can even use the petty cash account is we have to establish it. So we have to put money into that cash box, and that gets done by using your existing cash account and using that existing cash to put money into the petty cash account. So what we have to do accounting wise is journalize this. We have to journalize the establishment of the petty cash fund. So the transaction is worded as such. On August 19th, I paid cash, so I'm using cash my business already has, to establish a petty cash fund. Then they're saying they are putting $100 into their petty cash fund cash box. And the source document here is check number 8, because remember, checks are the same thing as using cash. So we start journalizing like normal. We'll start with our date. That goes in our date line, August 19th. And then we're going to look through our transaction again for our key words. So the first keyword just occurs right away, paid cash. So I'm going to go to the cash special amount column, and
an asset decreasing is a credit.
So paying cash means we are going to credit cash $100. I'm going to go back to my transaction and look for keywords that would be account titles here. So the next thing that I look at when I read that sentence is petty cash. Remember, that is completely separate from the cash account. So I'm not going to use the cash special amount column because the actual account title is petty cash. There is no petty cash special amount column. So instead, I'm just going to write petty cash under account title. If I had a credit already in cash, I need to put a debit into my general amount column. So I've got my debit there of $100. And then the last thing I just need to do is put check 8 as my source document. Whenever you make a payment from a petty cash fund, that gets done with our second vocab word that you're going to want to enter in Quizlet, which is a petty cash slip. So that looks like this. It looks very similar to a memorandum where they're telling you the date, they're telling you what you're buying and how much it cost. The slip itself is just used when you're taking payment or cash from the petty cash fund or from that cash box. You do have to record that in accounting. And then you just write something on that little slip and you keep all of your slips in your petty cash box. And when you run out of money in your petty cash box, you can do all your journal entries and then you can replenish your petty cash fund like we just did on the last slide. So when you make a payment, using a petty cash slip that also has to be journalized. And like I said, you're going to keep multiple slips in there and just wait until your petty cash fund is depleted until you record them. So in this transaction, it says August 31st, paid cash to replenish the petty cash fund of $30. And they actually used two different expenses that they may have used their petty cash for throughout the month of August. So that's why they're doing it on the last day of the month, because they're looking at every single petty cash slip and merging it into one transaction. So they've got a miscellaneous expense that they used petty cash for sometime in the month, and an advertising expense that they also paid for using petty cash sometime within the month. So again, we start our journal with our date. So we're going to date it August 31st. And I'm just going to read across the journal transaction and find the first account title that I come across. So the very first one is paid cash. So I'm going to go over to my cash special amount column. And when I try to figure out this amount, because I've got three different numbers, I'm looking for the total amount of cash I paid. So the total here that I paid was $30. So paying cash is a credit. So I'm going to put $30 in my credit. I'm going to keep reading in my transaction for the next account title. In this case, it's miscellaneous expense. That is a general amount column. So I'm going to start by listing miscellaneous expense. I need to find the corresponding amount to miscellaneous expense, which is listed immediately after it. So I had a credit in my cash, which means I'm going to debit my general column, and I'm only going to debit it $20. Now, some of you are like, oh my gosh, debits aren't equaling credits right now. Whoa. Don't worry, we still have another account title in our transaction, and that is advertising. So right under miscellaneous expense, we're going to list advertising expense, and the corresponding amount to advertising was $10. Again, we had a credit, so this has to become a debit of $10. So now, if I look at those two columns, if I add 20 and 10 together, my total debits are 30, and my total credits right now are also 30. So they still equal each other.
Complete satisfaction, balance all of your transactions.
And then you can just wrap up by putting your check number as your document number. So C12 in that document number. And that is petty cash. So make sure that you've added petty cash and petty cash slip to Quizlet. And then go ahead and open up your Applia to 5-4 working together. So I've got the instructions over here on the right and my journal entry on the left. And it's telling us that it would like us to journalize the following transactions completed during July. And our first transaction occurs on July 3rd. So I'm going to go to my date and I'm going to type in July 3rd. And it says that we have paid cash to establish a petty cash fund. So my first keyword here is paid cash. So I'm going to go to my cash special amount column. A payment of cash is a credit of $250, since that's the amount. Then it says we've established a petty cash fund. Again, petty cash, not the same thing as cash. So I'm going to go under account title and write petty cash. Because I had a credit in cash, I can use a debit in my general amount column of $250. And then my source document here is check 57. So that takes care of July 3rd. My second transaction is on the 31st. So I can start by entering in the 31st. And again, my first words identify my first account, paid cash. So I'll go over to my cash special amount column and to the paying cash as a credit again. So now I'm looking for an amount. It says paid cash to replenish the petty cash fund, $78. So that is my total cash that I paid, $78. Now it's going to list the multiple petty cash slips that we may have used that petty cash for in terms of payments. The first one says supplies. So on my first line, I'm going to type supplies. And the amount that is right after supplies is $25. I had a credit originally, so I'm going to go to a debit, and I'm only typing in the $25 that exactly goes with supplies. The next account title I see is miscellaneous expense. So I'm going to write down miscellaneous expense. And the amount that corresponds to our miscellaneous expense is $8. And again, I'm putting it in the debit column because I was already using a credit column before. The last account title that I see in that transaction is repairs. So I'll write repair expense. And that corresponding amount is $45. Again, putting it in the debit because I already had a credit. If I take 25 for supplies, 8 for miscellaneous, and 45 for repair, and I add those all together, that is going to equal the $78 that I used to establish the petty cash fund in cash. And I'm still having my debits equal my credits. And finally, I just need to put in my source document number, and that was check 97. So if you will make sure that you check that, you should be set. At this time, you have a couple more things to do. I want you to do the 5-4 on your own, the 5-4 application problem, both of which are on Applia, and then head over to Schoology and work on the 5-4 EOLR.